Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hello, welcome everybody to another episode of Bank Marketing Show. We're so glad to have you with us and listening or watching in today. Dan, how are you today?
Doing good. Good to be here. Good to keep this thing going.
Yeah, keep this thing going. And, you know, for a while now, we've been talking about several of our really great guests that we've had coming up in some of these episodes, and today is absolutely one of those. So I'll do a little intro in a moment, but Memrie, we're so glad to have you with us today.
Thanks. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. So to give a kind of a quick background to our listeners today, so Memrie is a very experienced lawyer, and she's with Jones Walker. That is a large law firm that has representation not only here in Mississippi but in lots of other areas as well. And Memrie, I know you've got an extensive background in focusing on bank regulatory and compliance matters. So that's a perfect fit for what we're going to dive into today. And I know you regularly are working with clients on kind of a whole range of federal and state financial service regulations and laws and Bank Secrecy Act and fair lending and, Dan, what is it we say? All the letters? Reg Z, Reg D, all the UDAP, all the, it sounds like alphabets.
That's right.
And Memrie, you, if I'm correct, but you're a certified community bank compliance officer and have a background, were a banker for a while and have worked with community institutions. So you've sat in the seat of a lot
That's right. I've been in the wild, as we say.
There you go, in the wild. So, and you're regularly a presenter with the Bankers Compliance Task Force. And we made a connection. Not only do your family and mine have a personal connection here and all of that, you and one of your partners came in and did a compliance training with my agency team recently that was just phenomenal. And at the end of that, I said, hey, Dan and I got to have you on the podcast. We need to talk about this to our entire bank leadership and bank marketer audience. So we're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into. I mean, we don't talk about compliance a lot on the show either. So it's because it's one of those topics like it's touches everybody, but like you need to have somebody with some expertise in it. So I'm excited to have you here too.
Thank you. Yeah, nobody wants to talk about compliance.
Well, nobody wants to talk about compliance. You're right, and everybody listening knows that there's marketing and compliance, and sometimes they just square dance really well together, and sometimes you gotta really kind of figure out where and how to best work together. And I think, Memrie, so much of that is being informative and building trust. In fact, you mentioned this in our workshop is marketers building trust with compliance folks and vice versa. That's a lot of that. So what is it? Give us a little bit of a more of kind of an overview of your work and kind of where you sit and what you do with community financial institutions.
Sure. Well, I have been in the banking regulatory legal field for about 15 years. And actually, today is my second anniversary with Jones Walker.
Nice.
So I've been here for 2 years. I am in the Jackson, Mississippi office. Jones Walker is based out of New Orleans. And I do banking, regulatory, and compliance work on a daily basis, work with compliance officers, primarily community banks in the Southeast. And we have a group, as you mentioned, called the Bankers Compliance Task Force that meets in person on a quarterly basis, but it's constant communication, asking questions, reviewing documents, conducting reviews for fair lending, Bank Secrecy Act, deposit compliance, loan compliance, reviewing websites, things like that. So run the gamut of in the compliance and regulatory environment for community banks.
That's awesome. Right in the middle of folks, the stuff that is on folks' desks that are our listeners all day, every day. I promise you. Yeah.
That's right.
Can you, it's interesting to see, like, when we run marketing campaigns, we touch compliance a little bit, but you live it. Can you talk a little about like common problems that, you run into with banks? Like, what are you at helping banks with most?
Sure. One of the main problems we see is not involving the compliance team or the compliance officer in the marketing decisions or having them review the final product. They are the ones who should have the final say with management and should be involved in all the conversations because they're deep in the regulations every day. And they're also the ones who are going to be questioned by examiners who are in the bank if there is a problem. So we always highly recommend that the compliance team be involved. It's hard sometimes, especially in rate environments like we're in right now, and mortgage loan originators and management really are trying to come up with ways to generate revenue and to make things more exciting and to lower rates, et cetera. But regardless of the environment, compliance should be involved for sure.
One of the other things that I remember you talking to our group about too was consideration of the bank's audience. And we certainly think about that from a marketing perspective, in speaking their language or speak to their pain points and, or relatability, creating personality for the bank, which some people outside of the industry kind of chuckle at, but we really do work to create a personality for each bank. But from a compliance perspective too, that about bank audience is an important part, is it not?
It's very important. And from a fair lending perspective, you really have to know who you're reaching and make sure you're not excluding any neighborhood, any area, any people based on a prohibited basis. And also, that it's easy to understand, that the advertisements are easy for an average person to understand, that disclosures are easy for an average person to understand, and that they match the bank's actual practices or what the product is actually offered. Or you mentioned UDAP earlier. You can really get into a pickle with UDAP violation if your disclosures and your actual practices or the product doesn't match what is advertised.
So how do you think about like, is there a definition you use for audience? Like when I think of the word audience from a marketing perspective, it's like, oh, we want to reach millennial first-time home buyers, right? But from the compliance perspective, it's more, they're the entire market, right?
Right. Every bank has an assessment area, which is an area that they are trying to serve. And within those areas are census tracts, and they might be majority minority or non-majority minority or low income, moderate income, upper income, or middle income. And that's a lot of what we look at from the compliance is the makeup from census data and how that assessment area is made up, and to make sure a bank is reaching its entire assessment area and not leaving out a part of it or bits and pieces of it. And, some regulators are even requiring that you reach a reasonably expected market area, which would be outside of the assessment area, but an area that the bank would be reasonably expected to market to. So that's how we look at it. So it would be a little bit different from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, we've seen our world, particularly in digital advertising and targeting with that, which oftentimes, a smart approach from a compliance perspective is setting radius areas around branch locations, as an example, those types of things. And having gotten away from targeting counties or zip codes, but I am seeing more and more utilization of census tracts that you mentioned because it's checking all of those regulatory boxes.
Right, that's correct. The Department of Justice in late 2021 started what they've called the Combating Redlining Initiative. And redlining is basically denying access to credit or other financial services to residents of a certain area based on their race or ethnicity. And there have been 13 consent orders, and marketing is mentioned, I think, in all of them, in most of them, if not all of them. And it has to do with not just digital advertising, it's billboards. It can be community outreach, getting out in the community and who you're talking to, trying to get loan applications, who mortgage loan originators are getting referrals from, the appearance of models on their websites and other print advertising when you use images, whether they're all white appearing. So that is a big focus, a big regulatory focus for all the agencies. So all the banks right now that we're working with are really looking at their advertising and their outreach efforts as far as that goes.
Yeah. That's such a big bucket of stuff. Memrie, I know one of the things too that we had talked in advance of the episode today about you sharing a bit about is FDIC and the compliance rules and all of that. And most, if not everyone listening to the show today, should be aware of there are new parameters, and new rules particularly for digital signage and those types of things for FDIC. So do you mind sharing a bit of insight that you've got into all of that, please?
Not at all. Yeah, you're right. There are new rules for the FDIC advertising of membership, and those rules go into effect on January 1st. A lot of it stays the same in the branch requirements and whatnot, but there is a new official digital sign, as you mentioned, and that sign is required now to be effective in January to be on deposit taking or websites that would have access to deposits or deposit taking websites. Could be mobile applications, etc. But there's a new sign. You can email the FDIC. There's a particular email on their website, and it sends the sign to the bank. And that is what needs to be used on the landing pages, on your home page, anywhere a consumer would log in. And it's a little bit different than just having the FDIC logo or member FDIC that we're used to now.
Yeah, and it's that clearly, conspicuously, continually. It is the parameters, right? For that kind of can sound ambiguous, but the web development part of my agency team, looks in that and says, "Oh, it needs to be in a header, and it needs to be, that in a continuous flow." And the best way to do that is to put it close to the bank logo that is either mid header or high left or whatever it is. And there are lots of different ways to do that, depending on what web platform you're utilizing or whatever the case may be. So, but in that right, clearly, continuously, and conspicuously, which hopefully that doesn't have too much gray area.
Hopefully not. They do clearly define it. There are some FAQs on the FDIC website that are very, very good. But they basically have said it's hard to miss, easy to notice, and understood by the ordinary consumer. And you're right. I think the goal of the FDIC is that any consumer who logs in online on any bank's website gets used to seeing the digital sign near the bank name on the top. So it can't be in the footer. You're right. It has to be in the header, right by the bank name. It can be on top of the bank name, below the bank name, to the right or the left. It doesn't matter, but it has to be near there. Continuously is new. Clearly and conspicuously, we're all used to from reading about in Reg Z and Reg DD, for whoever reads about that as much as I do. Sorry for y'all. But it's the continuously that's the new sort of buzzword. And basically the consumer can't click away from it. They can't click away from the new FDIC logos. They want it continuously displayed.
As long as you're on the website. So this applies to like the homepage of the site and once they've logged in, right? So the normal flow is like, come to the bank's homepage, click on online banking. So it needs to be
what they've said is the homepage, the landing page, the login pages, and any page where deposits can be accepted or accessed. So if it's general information website and a bank doesn't have any access to deposits, then they can continue with the member FDIC or FDIC logo that they have used. I think most people are just going to go ahead and use the digital sign anyway, and that's probably a best practice. But if there's any access to deposits, it has to be the new digital logo.
And the applicability of that switching over from web to talking about social media is a whole additional discussion, is it not?
It is. Social media, I think, because the posts are completely different than a standard web page that you would go to. They are not requiring the official digital sign to be on social media advertisements. You can use it. It's okay if a bank does want to go ahead and use it and keep everything consistent, but you can also keep using the member FDIC or the FDIC logo, FDIC insured, that they would be using now.
Let's shift gears, right? Like the FDIC logo is all about deposits, but what about lending? And there's that's the logo is kind of when you show up on the website and you're accepting money, but so much of marketing is also digital advertising and things like that. So how do you think about targeting for digital social media kind of ads versus just posts? What are some of the take us through some of the things that banks should think about there?
Well, you should always think about where, like we talked about before, who these advertisements are going to reach, and make sure you're not intentionally or unintentionally. A lot of times, discrimination, redlining, any fair lending impacts, they're unintentional. Nobody rarely is out there intentionally discriminating. So, looking at the audience, who it's going to reach geographically, and monitor, really need to monitor that to make sure that it's going to the bank's entire assessment area, looking at the models that are being used, the images that are being used, and making sure that it's a diverse and a true representation of the community. And, the consent orders use the phrase non-white, all white appearing. So you would want to make sure that not every model is a white appearing model. And just who does it actually reach? Once you determine who you're trying to reach, monitor to make sure who it actually reaches, and go ahead and look at the effectiveness of your advertising. Do you need to make a change? Is this working how you want it to? Is it gaining us applications from the areas we're trying to get into? And we're trying to serve minority areas and our whole entire assessment area. And we're also trying to serve low to moderate income areas, et cetera. So it just takes a lot of monitoring and probably changing your plan from here to there.
Yeah, Memrie, and you mentioned those, and we have more and more of our bank clients that are, it's all kind of under the CRA category, but more and more of our clients that are CDFI and, other, so the low to moderate income, target audiences, and there's some even have us as an agency running separate specific campaigns. So we've got our general audience campaigns, whether it be social ads or digital ads, OTT, CTV, ad, whatever the case may be, under that. But then other specific campaigns, so that we're getting specific reporting that are more targeted to and specific to low and moderate income, and all of that. CRA and, like I said, CDFI is only one of them, but that's becoming more and more in play with a lot of these, and banks that are trying to reach those audiences, which is broad in audience scope, and it's all of those things, which is really great. Serving more people.
It is great, and our banks really are the banks that we work with, especially, are really trying. Really trying to meet these areas, really trying to get applications from these areas. There are a whole lot of factors that come into play. You've got geographical considerations of, can somebody even get to the branch? And then areas in the Mississippi Delta where they would need to be able to walk to the branch. We have that as a real concern in some of our areas. So everybody's really trying to reach. There's also competition. There's a lot of competition. We have a lot of locally owned banks. We have a lot of banks that are merging with larger banks, and there's a bank on every corner in some counties. And that really is a factor into how you're going to get applications from these areas. And that should probably be taken into consideration when you're marketing.
Yeah. Well, so what, broadly, what are some other, I guess, kind of key points? And again, maybe we could be here all day digging into the specifics of all the different, truth and savings. And, again, as we mentioned, Reg Z, all the letter ones, DD, right. Z, and U, and, UDAP, and all the other ones. But what are some of the other kind of key points that you guys in your day-to-day Memrie are seeing as issues, caution points, things that are recurring problems maybe for lots of community banks?
One thing to think about more broadly rather than just a problem is that these regulations and the acts have been around for years and years and years. I mean, 1968, 1991, and unfortunately, 1991 doesn't seem like it should be that long ago, but it really is from these perspectives. Times have changed. I mean, everything's happening on your cell phone. We didn't have social media, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, all the things. Technology has changed so much. Expectations from consumers have changed so much. The regulations haven't changed. However, they apply across the board. No matter how you're marketing, where you're marketing, what media, what form you're using, these requirements and these regulations are constant. So I think that's important to remember, because sometimes we forget, because we're in this instant and, almost constant communication world that wasn't like that when these regulations were enacted. Another thing probably to consider is that third-party vendor management, banks working with third parties is a huge hot topic right now. And the regulators are very much focused on due diligence and really the banks conducting their due diligence prior to entering into an agreement with a third party. What all banks need to remember is even if a third party does the work for you, creates the ads like y'all would for you, conducts the marketing, makes the plan, et cetera, the bank's ultimately responsible. They're responsible for what goes out, and they're responsible for the monitoring, et cetera, which is another reason we really like to see compliance and management involved as well.
As recently as this morning, Memrie, I was meeting with my management team, and as a bank marketing focused agency, and we're working with over 60 community banks in 16 states, so we're all over the place. We were working on our own language for our onboarding processes with our bank clients that, in quick summary, said that at the end of it all, your compliance and you are the sign off. Even though we are doing the creative and the posting and the this and that and, managing your website or whatever, all the different things that we do. So in its clarity of understanding and being very clear that, you're the proofing, all of those kind of things, where our responsibility may be strategy, creative, doing all these things, the final sign off is yours, and being extremely clear about that. And I don't think that's always the case. Which, if I were a bank leader working with an agency or a third party that doesn't really know banking, would scare me to death. That would keep me up at night. Yes, I'm touting Dan's agency in mine, and of course I am. I'm throwing a plug in there, but because we work with banks all day, every day.
Right.
I think that's a huge issue.
And all this stuff, right? If we sum up everything we've talked about, right? Like, put the FDIC logo on stuff. Don't exclude people from targeting, right? I mean, I'm glossing over a lot of detail, but it's like that. It sounds simple, but when you are actually implementing campaigns, a lot of little questions come up, right? I mean, I've done campaigns for banks that, hey, we really want to target this zip code. Well, like, that's okay, but you got to make sure you're targeting everything else too. And, we know how to play with the messages we're using and how to make sure that the entire census tract or the entire kind of reachable area that you're talking about's reached. But yeah, I think anybody can run ads, but there's a lot of nuance in it that, something can be misleading even when it's not intended to be.
That's right. And that's a good point. If you have a misleading ad and the bank is looking at a unfair and deceptive act or practice, like we mentioned before, a UDAP violation. If the product is not truly offered in the way that it's advertised, there's a problem. If the disclosures don't match what's advertised, there could be a problem. If the website's not updated when paper disclosures and other documents are updated, there could be a problem. There's a lot to think about, and it's not an easy process, like you say.
Yeah, and you're talking about disclosures and the flow of the one-click rule. If you're listening to us and not watching, I'm holding up my phone, but as you said, Memrie, so much of marketing conversation is happening here, right? On screens. And, that being the case, on, a social post that might mention a particular product, or, even a digital ad or something, don't necessarily always have to have all of the disclosures on there, but the one-click rule, because it mentions a product, may be applicable. So, is that going in one click to the correct place on the website that has the disclosures evident there and accessible, correct? So,
correct.
Yeah.
And do those disclosures match if they do apply for the product or obtain the product, does it match the agreements and the disclosures that they're going to get at the time that they get, enter into the relationship with the bank?
Good point.
So we do see that a lot, and even privacy notices. The bank might change their privacy notice on paper, but it's still different on their website. So it's just important. Lots of things to keep up with.
So where are things going? What's coming up, right? We just had these FDIC rules are going into effect in January 1st, but like what else is coming from here?
That's $1 million question, and a lot will depend on the administration. Where things are going. That's usually, they regulations tend to head in different directions depending on the administration in charge at the time. And the CFPB right now is very active and very communicative, and the other agencies follow suit, whether it's guidance or actual law. So I think anything that comes out from the CFPB, even if it's a smaller community bank that's not regulated by the CFPB, you just want to pay really close attention to it, because that's what the other regulators are looking at and communicating with their examiners. So I think the third-party issues are really big right now. And of course, even the DOJ has come out and said that the combating redlining initiative is not going anywhere. So I think that's something to look at. Another thing from conversation with an FDIC examiner recently, they are looking at community outreach. Marketing is this huge umbrella with not just advertising, but also community outreach. They want those outreach efforts, financial literary efforts, et cetera, to be conducted actually in majority minority census tracts, which is a little bit of a change of thinking than it has been before. It was more of reaching out to the members of those communities, and now it is actually being there when you're offering those educational classes and other outreach services.
Wow. The humanization is actually relevant. Imagine that. Even in the digital marketing realm. Which a lot of ways is actually really cool to hear.
Yeah, they're using the phrase boots on the ground. That's the approach that they want the banks to take.
That's great. Well, Memrie, this has been great, as we said on the front end too, and even when you came and shared so much with my team, when you were done with this conversation with my team, and they were like, "Oh, wait, that's all the time we have. We wanted to talk about so much more," and I'm finding myself in this conversation. It's so expansive. And I know you could probably run down a rabbit hole with any of the individual topics that we've covered as well. And there's so much that goes into this. It's key and important for bank leadership, marketers, all of the above. So this has been so great to at least hit, I think, a lot of important high points today.
Thank you. I hope so.
Absolutely. Well, we can't let you get out of here without what we call the fun part, with our lightning round. And let's just get to know you a little better as well. So if you can stick around for a minute and cover some of our lightning round questions, that would be great.
Sure.
We'll start with this. So give us a maybe personal best, business best, Memrie.
Okay. Well, I'm sure a lot of people say this, but I think personal best is my children. So they so far. Now I will say we're about 2 months from getting into teenagerhood officially in our house. So that might change if you ever ask me again. But so far, I would definitely say, family is my personal best. And business best, really just the relationships that have formed with these bankers over the years, working with community banks. The community banks that we work with, they are really out there in the community, and they are helping the communities, and they're wanting to help the communities. And a lot of the communities, especially, where we are, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, et cetera, they the banks are the lifelines of the communities. And so just by helping the banks, we feel like we're helping the communities around these states. And it's been just a wonderful experience to develop real relationships with the people we've gotten to know over the last few years.
That's great. Well, that is the cool part about all three of us and our teams and everybody that we work with is you're right. Those community banks are pillars of the community and crucial and important. So it's cool part of the why of what we get to do, right?
Yeah.
So very good. Well, share with us a favorite book or resource of yours that comes to mind, Memrie.
Not really a book, but we've mentioned a couple of times the Bankers Compliance Task Force, and it's a group of community bankers who are members of the task force, and it's supported by Jones Walker, but we are in almost constant communication with everybody. So they tell us what's currently, as we say again, going on in the wild, what's happening in actual examinations. We talk about how to take a practical approach and how we're actually going to implement these new laws and regulations that come out on a regular basis and just really stay informed with everybody. Again, it's the relationships, and everybody tries to help everybody out because we're all in the same boat. And I think that is the most valuable resource that I have in my position.
Man, that's got to be a great group and platform for best practice sharing. And yeah, how are you guys doing this part and this part? I bet it is. That's great.
It really is helpful.
Yeah, super. Well, so share with us an impactful piece of advice that you've gotten.
Well, I think everybody's heard this starting from a very young age, but treat people the way you want to be treated and just be empathetic and understanding towards other people. We've all got a lot going on inside the walls of our office and inside the walls of our home and all around us. So just treat people kindly and to just be genuine and kind and really have a listening ear if need be.
I don't know that mantra is common enough, particularly in corporate America these days. So that's great.
Our community bankers are really good about it.
Yeah, you're right. It's a great group of people. Dan, I don't know how many times you and I have talked about that over the years, but it's one of the great things about working with community financial institutions is just grounded, great people the vast majority of the time.
Yep. Generally live the golden rule in your bank and in your community, and that's
everything will be great.
Well, it's how a lot of them have been successful. So it's
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Great one to keep in mind.
Well, Memrie, so flipping that around, what is something that you like to share with your staff, your clients, some of your folks that you work with?
This is on a completely different note, but my mentor's favorite thing to say, and has now become my favorite thing to say, especially since her retirement, is document, document, document. If you don't document what you did, don't document exceptions, don't document anything that the examiners think it didn't happen. You can tell them all day long that you did something or this is why you did something, but if it's not documented anywhere, then it's basically like it didn't happen. So document everything, please.
I tell you, that's tough too in this day and age of just text me to remind me about something or whatever the case may be, and then that's gone.
Yeah.
And that is the opposite of what you're saying is the crucial importance of documenting within processes that are already in place. That's huge.
Yes, and it can really help if there is a potential that there could be a problem with something and it's well documented, the problem goes away. But if it's not, then typically it becomes looked at more closely.
Yeah, well, super. Well, Memrie, in our show notes for this episode, if it's okay with you, we will definitely include your email and contact information so
Please.
that I wouldn't be at all surprised if some of our listeners are going, man, if I could just ask her a few more questions. So, if that would be good with you, we'll include that information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really great information for all of our folks and listeners. To remind everybody, you go to bankmarketingshow.com. That's where you'll be able to find this episode with Memrie right up at the top as you're listening to this, and click through to some of that information and opportunity to get in touch with her if you want, or reach out to Dan and I. anytime. We are always happy to share best practices, warnings to things to avoid that we've seen others make mistakes, those types of things. That's a lot of why we do this whole bank marketing show. So,
yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Memrie. Appreciate you being with us.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.